Last time we used a very simple Ansible playbook and we configured SSH keys for Ansible, and we also used SSH agent. We used only a very simple playbook and some simple tasks in the playbook, and we will learn about Ansible rows today. If you look at the screen, you can probably recognize that this is not what we used before. We had one task, the hello world task, which created a file, hello world.txt. But the problem was that I used my own username, so I had permission to create the file in my home folder. And if you use that task, then that will probably fail because you don't have the username, so you cannot create a file in a non-existent folder. So I added a new task, which is not really new because we used this at the beginning of the video. Then I replaced it with the other task, the hello world task. So I can use this to register a variable which will store the output of the whoami command, and this can detect the username on the remote server. And then I can use this variable in the other task. We don't really need this because we have another variable which we use, the Ansible user, here in the inventory file. I didn't want to start with that, but we will use this variable today. And before we start, I have to show you that I have a blog post about this topic, which is not public yet, but I will share the link under the video. And I also have a GitHub repository which will contain the source code of what we will do today. Again, I will share the link under the video. So let's talk about Ansible roles. An Ansible role is actually a group of tasks which we can reuse in multiple playbooks, for example. And you can also share an Ansible role on Ansible Galaxy. Let's check this Ansible Galaxy. You can log in and upload your content or just browse and find any Ansible role that you want to use in your playbook. I don't want to download or upload any Ansible role today, so I will use my own Ansible roles and playbooks. I will close this. And before we start to create roles, I also want to show you some scripts. Last time we had to use SSH agent, so when we activated our Python environment, we first had to start the SSH agent and then add the SSH key, and then we had to activate or reactivate our Python environment. So I have a script which will simplify this process. Let's copy this and I will save this as homelab-env.sh. Let's try this, homelab env.sh. This is it. So instead of sourcing the original script of the virtual Python environment, I will source this homelab-env. And there is another script which I want to add before we continue, and this is the homelab-env-os.sh, which is similar, except here we can set the homelab_env variable so we can customize the name of the virtual environment, and this is what I need because I had to run a virtual machine using multipass, and in that virtual machine I run Linux, and outside that virtual machine I have a MacBook, and the two different virtual environments are not compatible, so I had to use a different name. Now let's go back to Visual Studio Code and save this as homelab and os.sh, which will actually automatically detect the operating system. And if I'm on Linux, then it will return Linux. Now I can try this in my terminal. So before I source this, I want to start the SSH agent and the bash shell in the agent. Actually, I don't No, I don't want the bash shell. I want my original shell, which is in the shell variable. And now I can source homelab, and we can see it works because it asks for my passphrase, which belongs to my SSH key. I can also test this using a simple command. Works. So we can start to create Ansible roles. So we have to create a specific folder structure. We need a folder in the project root called roles, and in that folder we will have our roles, and the name of the role will be hello underscore world. In role we will have a folder called defaults and another called tasks. And now I can also create a main YAML in the defaults folder and a main YAML in tasks. So the defaults folder will contain the default value of our variables, and the tasks will contain obviously the tasks, which I can copy from our playbook. I need only this one. I don't want to keep this UI command. Let's go to the task. And I also need to fix the indentation and not make it worse. Obviously, I can't use this command.stdout variable because this does not exist. So I need a different variable, which will be Ansible user, as I already mentioned it, Ansible user. And now I need a way to refer to this role. Let's go back to the playbook. I want to remove everything from here. I don't need the tasks because now I have roles. And here I need a list of roles. I can simply use this home underscore world. And now we can hope it will work. Go back to the terminal and run the playbook using our inventory file and the playbook YAML. And we have a problem here in the playbook, of course, because this is not home world, this is hello world. Now it works. And the next, which I want to do, I want to put this whole path into a variable because I want to be able to change this. Maybe I don't want to save the variable in my home folder. I want to save that at a specific location. So let's use a variable instead of that. And I will call it, again, not home, but hello world, hello underscore world. And this is the name of my role. And this is how I start the name of my variables in the role. After that, I can choose a name, for example, dest, because I want to set the destination of this file. And now I can go to the defaults folder and to the main YAML and save this. I don't know why I always write home. So hello world dest, and this can be the default value of this variable. If I try to run this again, it should run. Yes, it still works. So let's go back and add a new variable. So sometimes I don't want to change the whole path. I only want to change the username because maybe I don't want to save the file in my home, but I want to change it to someone else's home. Now I can use hello world user, and the default value of this variable can be the template of Ansible user. So now I have to change this value of hello world dest, and I need to use the hello world user variable instead of the Ansible user. And I still hope it will work. It works. And if I also add the quotation mark here, then you can also see the disappearing blue mark here, which tells me that I was able to use the same content that I pushed to GitHub. So the next step is, of course, closing some files here. I don't need this script, but I need the playbook. Let's go back to the playbook. And I want to show you that we have another syntax for our roles. Here we can also use this key value pair, which is role and not roles. Yes, so we can use this syntax where we can add more parameters to the role. For example, I can change a value of a variable. Hello world dest, for example, and I want to save this to /opt/hello world txt. And the problem is that I don't have permission to write this folder. I don't care, I want to try this. Let's go back to the terminal and try to run this now. It fails because the /opt folder is not writable, at least not for me. No problem, we can also use another parameter here. It is called become, which means we will become root users on the remote server. It's like running sudo on the remote server after SSHing into that server. And we need to use true, become true. So let's try to run this, which will still not work. We need to set the password, the sudo password. We can do this using the ask become pass flag, which is similar to the ask pass flag, which was required by SSH, but this will be handled by Ansible, so we don't have to have SSH pass here on my Mac. Let's try this now. I need to set my sudo password. And it looks like it changed something on the remote server. It created the hello world file, and I want to check that because I don't believe it. Now I could just log into the remote server, but I can use another way. I can use Ansible commands to check the content of a remote file. We will need to use the Ansible command and not the Ansible playbook command. And after the Ansible command, we have to set the groups, the server groups, which is all because we don't have any other group. So it is Ansible all. And I also have to set the name or the path of the inventory file, which is the same how we used it with Ansible playbook. And we don't have to use a playbook now. We need to use a module, an Ansible module, and that is Ansible built-in command. And that module has argument, so I need to use -a and use the argument, which is the actual command which I want to run on the remote server. Let's use cat to check the content of that file. And now you can also see the output of the command which we ran on the remote server. This works because this is not a playbook. This is just a single module used on the remote server, so it is easier to show me what the output is. This was all I wanted to talk about today. We can still check why this file, this homelab and sh file is modified, but I'm almost sure that this is just because of some extra new lines in the original file, which I didn't use now. So now you can finally run Ansible tasks. You can use SSH keys and SSH agent. You can use simple task, or you can also use an Ansible role. And an Ansible role can have multiple folders, not just the defaults and not just the task folders. You can also use templates and static files if you want to copy some configuration files, for example. So now we are finally getting to the point where we can run complex Ansible roles on the remote server. So for example, we can create a virtual machine on the remote server. And before that, we can also install the requirements. So we can create the virtual machine. We can then start the virtual machine and install Docker in that virtual machine. So we will have multiple roles to create our own home lab. And if you want to learn about that, then all you have to do is subscribe to the channel and maybe watch the video.